Shalom Aleichem, Mishpachim. I am coming to you to finish part one in this part two. So to finish the second Torah reading of Vayikra, the portion of Vayikra in the book of Vayikra. So, and this is with Onkelos on the Torah. So I'm going to finish and I'll read verses 2 through 6 of chapter, don't remember what chapter, but chapter 2, verse 2 through 6. And Torah up here, Onkelos down here, translation down here. And verse 2. He brings it to Aaron's sons, the priests. He shall scoop out of it a handful of its best flour and its oil, in addition to all of its frankincense. The priest burns this memorial on the altar, a sacrifice that is accepted with pleasure before the Lord. All right, verse 2, Onkelos. He shall scoop. Only the priests may scoop the flour, which differs from the procedure for the pouring and adding of incense. All of the Targums translates Vayikmatz, as if it read Vayikmitz, with an additional hey, the grammatical form used throughout the verse. Compare the commentary to offers in the prior verse. Handful. The biblical meaning, Hebrew meaning, melo kum tzo, meaning again, or he takes a handful again. Onkelos does not translate the term, but uses an Aramaic cognate. It denotes a minute quantity. Rashi, Rashbam, and Chazkuni define it as 3 fingers full, with the thumb and pinky used to remove the excess flour. All right. Others claim that it means a full fistful, with all of the fingers used. The Babylonian Talmud in Menachot 11a regards the procedure of measuring its amount as one of the most difficult tasks in the temple service. And its oil. Sifra states that nothing but flour and oil may be in the priest's hand. Even if as little as a grain of salt or the smallest bit of frankincense were included, the offering would be rendered invalid. Memorial. The precise meaning of Scripture's azkara is difficult to determine, and, again, as with virtually all the technical terms in Leviticus, Onkelos does not translate it. Rashi, based on Sifra, suggests that it means memorial or remembrance, from the root ze ch r zkhr. God will remember the act of the donor for good, since he was pleased with the offering. Our Targumist would avoid such an anthropomorphic understanding of this name, since it could be taken to imply that God sometimes forgets. The Akkadian cognate means token. Sacrifice. The biblical understanding is a fire offering. See commentary in verse 19. And pleasure. Biblical understanding of pleasure in this case, in this sense, is pleasing odor. See commentary in verse 1, chapter 9. I'm sorry, this was verse 1, chapter 9. And before. The biblical understanding of this, in this sense, is before to the Lord. Before the Lord. See commentary in chapter 1, verse 2. All right. Verse 3. Torah. The rest of the meal offering belongs to Aaron and his sons. It is a very holy portion from the Lord's sacrifices. Verse 3. Onkelos. Rest. The Bible characteristically attaches a vav to the front of a word that is written in the past tense to transform it into the future tense. Scripture also frequently has a word begin with a hey, the definite article the, even when the verse's context requires the indefinite. Our Targumist usually retains the vav in the first mentioned instance, but transforms the term into the future tense. He handles many of the grammatically superfluous heys by dropping them. He does both of these things with rest, here in verse 10, and in chapter 6, verse 9. belongs to Aaron and his sons. Rashi, based on Sifra and the Babylonian Talmud in Yoma 14a and 17b, takes the wording somewhat literally and maintains that the high priest took the first share of the meal offerings, and the rest was divided among the other priests. In contrast, Ibn Ezra insists that all priests shared equally. Onkelos, as usual, simply translates the words without clarification of the technical points. Very holy portion. The Bible's oft-repeated superlative double usage, kodesh, kodeshim, refers either to the most holy site within the tabernacle or temple, the Holy of Holies, or to the portion of the offering that may be consumed by priests only within the courtyard of the tabernacle or temple. Again, Onkelos does not translate the phrase or explain it. The Lord's sacrifice. The biblical understanding and translation is the Lord's fires. Onkelos makes clear that the fires referred to here are sacrifices, although the Targumist inserts kadam before in the prior verse. He only changes the phrase here by attaching di, of, and does not soften the near anthropomorphic phrase. Verse 4, and this is Torah. If you offer a meal offering that was baked in the oven, it must be the best flour, unleavened. Unleavened loaves that are mixed with oil, or unleavened wafers that are anointed with oil. Verse 4, Onkelos, if you offer. Sifra and the Babylonian Talmud, Menachot 76a, state that people who sacrifice meal offerings baked in an oven may form them as loaves or wafers. The loaves are baked with oil mixed with flour, while the wafers have oil placed on them after the baking. Both offerings consist of 10 units. Oil and oil. The repetition of the noun oil suggests that even second and third grade olive oil could be mixed with its offering, in contrast to the olive oil placed in the candelabrum, which had to be first grade. Verse 5, Torah. If a meal offering on a griddle is your offering, it must be of the best flour that is mixed with oil, unleavened. Verse 5, Onkelos, griddle. The biblical understanding and meaning of this term in this sense is machavat. The sages differed in their identification of this utensil. Onkelos identified it as a kind of griddle. The Sadiagon as a metal vessel understands it as being a metal vessel used for cooking and baking. Rashi, based on the Babylonian Talmud in Menachot 63a, understands it as being a flat, shallow pan, and Ibn Ezra understands it as being a dish covered by a dish. Verse 6, Torah, break it into little pieces and pour oil on it. It is a meal offering. Verse 6, Onkelos, little pieces. Each wafer or loaf was divided into 2, and then further broken into a total of 4 pieces. Babylonian Talmud, Menachot 70b. All right, that is the second aliyah of Vayikra, Parsha Vayikra, in the book of Vayikra, with Onkelos on the Torah. All right. Now, I'm going to read from the Daily Wisdom on the Parshiot of the second aliyah. Of Leviticus. All right. I'm going to read a short introduction to the whole book, the whole portion of Vayikra, Torah portion of Vayikra. The title of this introduction is Offerings. And the Torah portion of Vayikra is chapter 1. Chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 5, verse 26. Leviticus, the third book of the Torah, contains very little action. It is primarily devoted to the rules governing the relationship of God with the Jewish nation collectively, as well as his relationship with each person individually. The first 2.5 sections describe the procedures for the offerings to be made in the tabernacle. The first section of the book of Leviticus opens as God calls out, Vayikra, to Moses, bidding him to enter the tabernacle so he can teach him these procedures. All right. I read that yesterday. All right, we are in the second reading. What I just read was chapter 1, verse 14 through chapter 2, verse 6, the second aliyah. The hides of ascent offerings of cattle, sheep, and goats were given to the priests. The rest of the animal was consumed in fire on the altar. In contrast, fowl sacrifices were completely burned. The title of this wisdom on the Parshiot is called Pleasing to God. He must rip it open with its feathers, but he must not tear it completely apart. The priest must then burn it up on the altar on top of the wood on the fire. It is an ascent offering, a fire offering, pleasing to God. Leviticus chapter 1, verse 17. When offering up a voluntary animal ascent offering, the offerer had the choice of bringing a bull, a sheep, a goat, a turtle dove, or a pigeon. It obviously cost more to offer up a bull than a pigeon. So it was usually the richer people who offered up bulls, and the poorer people who offered up sheep, goats, and fowl. Rashi tells us that the reason the Torah says that cattle, sheep, goat, and fowl offerings are all pleasing to God is because it is the same whether one brings a lot or a little for his offering, as long as he directs his heart to heaven. One indication that this is so is the fact that the whole bull is not placed on the altar to be consumed. The hide is given to the priests. In the case of fowl, however, the entire bird is consumed on the altar. Thus, the fowl compensates for being less valuable by being wholly burned, as opposed to the bull, which is mostly but not completely burned. This reminds us that whenever we do something for God, what matters most is the heart that we put into what we do. And that is the reading of Vayikra, the Torah portion of Vayikra. All right. Have a wonderful evening. Layla Tov.